bombshell new lawsuit that involves Sean Diddy Combs, but isn't against the disgraced music mogul. As Diddy is listening to closing arguments in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial in federal court in New York, his son, Justin, has been hit with a lawsuit by a woman who claims that he lured her to Los Angeles to be raped by multiple men, including his dad, Sean Diddy Combs.
The world watched as the once untouchable empire of Sean Diddy Combs began to fall. But the latest revelations, the shocking twist, cuts far deeper than business or celebrity. This is about family. This is about legacy. This is about the terrifying.
How about the timing of this new lawsuit involving the son of Sean Diddy Combs? It was just in the hours after the government on Thursday finished their closing arguments in the case against the disgraced music mogul that we learned about this new lawsuit against Sean Combs' son, Justin. Justin is one of Diddy's 7 kids. Here he is with his dad's arm around his shoulder. Justin has been in court supporting his dad, just as his siblings have been over the past 7 weeks of testimony. Now, listen, whatever your feelings are on Sean Combs and whether you think he's guilty of the charges that could put him in federal prison for the rest of his life, you just have to think how difficult it must be to hear about all the sexual exploits of their father. But if you believe the allegations I'm about to tell you in this new lawsuit brought against Justin Combs, Justin apparently was very aware of his dad's lifestyle. The new lawsuit that just dropped was filed by a woman from Louisiana who says in 2017, Justin Combs coaxed her to come to LA because she says that Diddy's son promised her a job in the entertainment industry. She claims the two had met on Snapchat, and Justin allegedly asked for explicit pictures, and she sent them. The woman, who's not named in this suit, says when she got to LA, she was raped by several men, including a certain music mogul now at the center of this high-profile, historic trial in federal court in Lower Manhattan. Yes, Sean Diddy Combs. The alleged victim claims that Justin invited her out west for a weekend to talk about her career. But when she got there, she says she was kept in a house in Beverly Hills. And according to the lawsuit, things seemed fine at first, but when she allegedly asked Justin Combs if they were going to leave the house, he said no. She claims that Justin Combs offered her alcohol, pills, and weed, and she thinks that the weed was laced. Now, you can see in those allegations some of the comparisons in this lawsuit to the so-called freak-offs that we have been hearing about for weeks at the center of the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial. The woman says after she took the drugs, 3 men entered the house and all of them were wearing masks. Now, it's unclear what kind of masks the men were wearing, but when I read that part, I thought about the testimony of Sheree Hayes in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, the escort known as the Punisher. He testified that during a freak-off, Sean Combs allegedly wore a face covering that he likened to a Muslim hijab. In the lawsuit against Justin Combs, the alleged victim says that she knew that one of the men was Diddy just because of his mannerisms, but how about this? She also knew it was Diddy because she says that Justin, as his dad, entered the home to allegedly rape a woman that he brought to LA, called Diddy, quote, Pops. Now, we see on Justin's social media that Pops is the phrase that he often uses for his dad. In this lawsuit, the alleged victim claims that she was led to a bedroom where she was allegedly told, quote, you better let this happen or else. Then she says that each man took a turn raping her, calling it a, quote, brutal gang rape. After that, she was taken to an airport on Monday and flown home. Not only is Diddy facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison if convicted of all the charges in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial, there have been nearly 80 lawsuits filed against him in civil court. Many are still active. Several of the lawsuits accuse Diddy of sexual abuse and are filed by people who are not giving their names, just like in this lawsuit that we're talking about. This also isn't the first lawsuit that Justin Combs has recently faced. Justin was named in a suit brought by music producer Rodney Jones, who goes by Little Rod. Rod claims that Diddy coerced him into sexual acts, and you can see the suit also names Justin Combs and accused Justin of covering up a shooting in 2022 at Little Rod's studio in LA.
Disturbing truth allegedly concealed behind the most famous father-son duo in hip-hop. Diddy is losing it completely because the secrets he kept hidden between him and his own son, King Combs, are finally being dragged into the blinding, unforgiving light. For years, the image was perfect: Diddy, the mentor, the mogul, passing the torch to his handsome, talented son, Christian King Combs, a dynasty in the making. Now, that picture is shattered. replaced by a grotesque shadow that implicates the son in the father's alleged criminal world. This is the shocking twist that has caused the ultimate breakdown for Diddy. His own blood is now intrinsically linked to the dark secrets that define his alleged criminal enterprise. The separation Diddy always relied on, the idea that his private life was separate from his family, has vanished. The disturbing secrets coming to light are a direct reflection of the lawsuits and federal investigations that have been piling up. The core revelation is that King Combs was not just a spectator to his father's alleged freak-offs, but an active participant
LA with his dad. In May, a judge did dismiss Justin from Little Rod's lawsuit, so he is no longer facing those allegations. As for the lawsuit filed in the hours before his dad's attorneys were to make closing arguments, E! News reports that Diddy's attorneys have denied the allegations, but it's unclear what Justin's response is at the time of this recording. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney Will Corman. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us. What stands out to you in this lawsuit that Sean Combs is named, but also his son Justin?
Well, it's interesting. I think the connection to Sean Combs is pretty tenuous. You know, we've gone through this all. It almost seems the one connection to Sean Combs that they actually put on him is the allegation that Justin called one of the masked men Pops during the course of the assault or just before the assault. That's it. The other connection, obviously, is that Sean Combs is Justin Combs' dad. So I think it's a bit of a stretch. Again, we're just receiving these documents now. We're just going through this lawsuit now. Perhaps there's more out there, but it really doesn't seem that way.
And of course, people who are victims of sexual violence, you want them to get their justice. We have seen dozens of lawsuits filed against Justin's dad in the wake of when he was indicted for the trial that he's on right now. How do you go through these lawsuits and understand who's telling the truth and who actually has a case that could be heard in court? Someone like Cassie Ventura, when you see that video from 2016, or you do look at some of these Jane Doe lawsuits and you wonder how many of them are true.
Look, as a criminal defense attorney, it's my job to be cynical, and it's my job to, review everything with a pretty jaundiced eye. So the question really becomes are there corroborating facts and circumstances from Jump Street that make sense? So for example, if this lawsuit is alleging that something happened in LA during a specific period of time, do we know that Sean Combs was there? Do we actually know that he was present in LA? These things aren't difficult to find out, but it's those baby steps to trying to build the foundation of a lawsuit to see what's realistic that really matter in a case like this. And as you so correctly said, we want victims of domestic violence, of sexual violence, and so on and so forth to actually be compensated accordingly. Unfortunately, when we have circumstances where we have somebody famous who's been charged with crimes, we have somebody famous who's been sued, there can be instances where other folks jump on the bandwagon. And I'm not suggesting that's what's happening here, but it is something that everyone needs to look at skeptically.
Right, absolutely. If you were to bring a lawsuit against someone like Justin Combs, or any of these, and even the cases involving his dad, and you're bringing a civil suit, what facts do you need to have? I mean, certainly if you have a victim who says that this happened and they're ready to, they're able to provide some corroborating evidence that something happened, what do you actually need to be able to go to the courthouse and say, I'm filing a lawsuit against this person?
I think that you need to have somebody who's willing to state under oath that this is what happened to me, that this is what I'm alleging, these are my damages, this is how it's impacted me. And as an attorney, again, I would want to make sure, especially in a lawsuit like this where it involves a high-profile person, but quite frankly, in any lawsuit, that there is some corroborating information out there so that my lawsuit isn't tossed out of court pretty quickly.
And reading through this complaint,
and critically, is facing his own severe allegations that mirror the alleged behaviors of his father. One of the most profound and disturbing disclosures centers around a civil lawsuit filed by a former yacht stewardess, Grace O'Marque. The allegations are harrowing. She claims that she was sexually assaulted by Christian King Combs aboard a yacht chartered by Diddy in late 2022. But here's the sinister family dynamic. Diddy himself was named as a defendant in that same lawsuit, accused of aiding and abetting his son's alleged assault. Think about that for a moment. This is not a distant acquaintance. This is his own flesh and blood. The allegation is that Diddy's entire environment, the yacht, The charter, the hedonistic environment of drugs and parties, was designed to enable this kind of alleged behavior, even by his own son. What's truly breaking Diddy is the destruction of the Combs family brand, the ultimate image he spent his life cultivating. The allegation that Diddy created a culture where his sons were not only exposed to, but allegedly encouraged to participate in. This supposed dark lifestyle is the ultimate psychological and public blow.
Mentions several other lawsuits. You have the lawsuit from Rodney Jones, who's known as Little Rod, and Sean Combs is facing that lawsuit, and his son was named in it, but has since been dropped. What do you make about it having all these other different cases and elements brought in? What is the attorney here trying to prove?
Well, it almost appears as if the attorney is saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. So here are all these other lawsuits, and I've reviewed the complaint, and they talk about them in some detail. They don't just list them. They say, this happened on this date, and this person sued Sean Combs here, and this person sued Sean Combs here for this set of facts and circumstances. And they're essentially trying to say, because there's all these other lawsuits, you should give this one a stamp of approval, because again, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Tony Busby, his law firm is bringing this. He has been in the civil world a very, very prominent name. For those who don't know him, and you work in criminal defense, what do you know about Tony Busby? Knowing that it's his law firm bringing this, what does that tell you?
I don't think that the Busby law firm is taking these allegations lightly. I believe they have the resources to do their own investigations prior to actually filing these suits. So this isn't some, sole practitioner who's trying to jump on the cottage industry that's been created around suing Sean Combs. I think that they have the ability to investigate this. They have the ability to decide whether or not they want to take on these cases. And I think that does lend some credibility, albeit, not a ton, but I think it does lend some credibility to the facts and circumstances surrounding it. In other words, this alleged victim didn't just walk in off the street to some random law firm who then is saying, oh, we now have the ability to sue Sean Combs. This is someone who's been down this well-trod path before and probably knows exactly what the pitfalls are in suing somebody as prominent as Sean Combs.
This lawsuit came down at the time we're recording this, came down last night. So that was a couple hours after the government finished their closing arguments against Sean Combs. And as we're recording this right now, Sean Combs, his defense team is giving his closing argument. What do you make about the timing of this? It's against Justin Combs and Sean Combs' name, but it's happening right in the middle of maybe the most pivotal part of this entire trial.
I don't exactly know what to make of the timing of it. I think it's interesting. I think that I'm a little surprised that it's come out so late, but sometimes we don't know what led the alleged victim in this lawsuit to break their silence and to file this lawsuit. Perhaps they were watching the testimony or reviewing the testimony in the criminal case and said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened to me. Perhaps they said, they listened to the testimony and they said, there's so many victims here. I believe that I am one too. We don't know what prompted it. I think the timing is interesting, but I don't know that I can make anything of it as we sit here right now.
I think of recently you had Tyler Perry, prominent name in Hollywood, very different case, but accused of sexual violence and sexual harassment, workplace harassment with an actor who had worked on one of his shows, and the actor provided text messages in the complaint. This doesn't have that. Very different case. But does the fact that there's not that visual evidence that we can look at, and I don't know what type of...
The secrets reveal a chilling like father, like son dynamic in the worst possible way. Diddy's alleged darkness, rather than being contained, supposedly seeped into and corrupted his own progeny. Then there is the shocking twist that King Combs, in a moment of baffling hubris and denial, released a diss track in the middle of his father's catastrophic legal battle. The song, which audaciously referenced the federal raids on their homes, was a pathetic attempt to project strength and defiance, but it backfired spectacularly. It only amplified the negative attention, drawing scorn and mockery, and forcing the world to look even harder at the allegations against the younger Combs himself. Diddy, the master manipulator of public image, could only watch as his son essentially poured gasoline on a raging inferno of bad press. This is the moment Diddy truly lost control, not of his legal battle, but of his family narrative. We're talking about an alleged generational toxicity. Diddy's entire life was about control, about crafting an image of power, success.
Recording of Justin Combs, and he says it's allegedly with a sex worker. Do you think that part is incriminating too, that the feds may be looking at that recording?
I do. And during Combs' initial appearance before the new judge Subramanian, there was some discussion of this, and Christian and Justin were in court as well, supporting their father. But the feds were talking about the 96 different electronic devices they seized and the terabytes and terabytes of data. Now, some of it might not be relevant, but some of it may be very much on point, because going back to Cassie's original allegation, Combs reportedly recorded many of these sex acts. It might have been for his sexual pleasure. It might have been to maintain control over the participants. But whether it's a voluntary recording, whether it's a hotel security camera, whether it's something that Lil Rod, took in a still video or a recording, or whether it's something that a civil plaintiff, a victim of sexual assault, I try not to name them, even though she did out herself in the complaint, took without the knowledge of Christian or others. It's all very, very powerful, because oftentimes when you're dealing with sexual assault and sexual abuse, these are things that happen behind closed doors, right? Could be at a home, could be at a hotel. In this case, could be on a yacht. And usually there aren't a whole lot of witnesses to it. So you will have a he said, she said type situation in many, many cases. Well, a recording can really change that narrative, because again, it can really corroborate the story of one side or the other.
In regards to Justin specifically and these alleged recordings, audio, all of that, so that's in relation to Lil Rod's lawsuit. He's actually a co-defendant listed quite a few times throughout this. And in addition to him sitting next to this alleged prostitute, we have that photo, there's also allegations that he actually partook in these freak-offs and potentially drugged women. This is something Lil Rod is saying. How would the feds go about proving something like that? I know that's the pattern we've seen across a lot of these civil suits, that women allege Diddy, for instance, drugged them. But now Lil Rod's also pointing the finger at Justin Combs, saying he drugged some of these women. How would the feds then go to look further into that?
Yeah, Lil Rod's lawsuit is interesting in that there are many defendants. We talked about Christina Horam, right? Some of the allegations that came out in Lil Rod's lawsuit was Christina, of course, being Combs' right-hand woman. She allegedly had the fanny pack with the drugs that were provided to the sex workers, or that there are the allegations directly against Justin as well. So whenever you're proving something like this, obviously, you're going to rely on the testimony of witnesses. It could be an independent witness, because the sex workers, even though they're participants in a sex act, they won't necessarily be charged, or I don't think they're going to be defendants in the lawsuit, if the allegation is that they were forced to perform these sex acts and it wasn't just a commercial transaction. So you can rely on that testimony. Obviously, Lil Rod himself, but he's a plaintiff, so his testimony may be biased, may be true, but it's certainly something that you would want more of if you are a prosecutor. And then you look to video, and you look to other types of evidence, maybe text messages, something that corroborates what Lil Rod has said. And of course, if you have someone like Horam who flips, that would be very, very helpful for prosecutors, because we know that former employees, they usually have a lot of information, and they can be leveraged in a criminal case or even a civil one to cooperate to save themselves.
I want to talk more about that, the flipping of all of this, because right now Diddy is the only one who has been charged federally in relation to this scheme, this alleged scheme. But as you pointed out, there are other people who have been identified as participants in all this. Christina Coram obviously is the main one, along with the Combs enterprise or empire, whatever you want to call it. She has not yet been charged, but I'm pretty sure
and aspiration. He had a lineage to maintain, an heir to groom. The world was meant to look at King Combs and see the future of Bad Boy, the continuation of the legendary legacy. But the secrets finally spilling out suggest that Diddy may have groomed his son for something far darker than a music career. He allegedly groomed him for his criminal enterprise. The core of Diddy's disintegration is the realization that his son, Christian King Combs, is now a legal and public extension of his own alleged crimes. This isn't just a son supporting his father. This is the son facing lawsuits and allegations that are functionally identical to the ones that brought Diddy to his knees. The secret here is that the bad boy lifestyle wasn't just a culture of excess. It was, allegedly, a template for abuse that King Combs inherited. Consider the lawsuit filed by Grace O'Marque, a former stewardess on a yacht chartered by Diddy. This is the single most defining piece of evidence in the narrative of Diddy's breakdown over his son. She alleges that King Combs sexually assaulted her on that yacht in 2022. That, in itself, is horrific. But the truly
As you've told me in the past, probably this interview and many others, the feds are going to be talking to Christina Quorum, and it would be in her best interest likely to cooperate with them. But what about Justin and Christian? I mean, they're so close to Diddy. They're his sons, and they have accusations against them. They could, as you said, face these charges in the future. What do you think? Do you think that they would flip?
I think it's a lot less likely that Justin and Christian would flip. I've seen children testify against their parents. We've seen it on Law and Crime many times, and obviously it makes for great drama and courtroom theatrics. But I think in a case like this, it's going to be less likely. They really owe everything to their father, right? He's obviously someone with significant financial means. He's someone that's going to pay for their lawyers and protect them. I think it would be pretty surprising to see a flip like that. Of course, anything's possible, but I think it's less likely given that there are people that really don't have that familial tie. They don't have their legacy. They don't have potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to lose if they end up turning sideways on their parents. So it's obviously a possibility. I think it's highly unlikely, especially what we saw during that first hearing. The children all being in court, directly supporting Combs, him waving and blowing kisses to them. I think a flip is unlikely with respect to Justin and Christian.
Yeah, what do you make of that? Obviously, they're supporting their father, as you've discussed. They were actually in the courtroom supporting him, as you said, blowing kisses, all of that. But then there's also headlines, photos, videos of Christian Combs, who's been out partying after all this. People are obviously clamoring at any sort of Diddy news. But do these two have to kind of keep in mind that the focus is going to be on them? They are being watched, I mean, in relation to what their dad was doing, but also their allegations against them. I mean, is this something they should be keeping in mind, their public image?
I do, Sierra, and it's not just about the courtroom. We've talked about the court of public opinion in a case like this, and the jurors are ordinary people, and everyone knows who Sean Diddy Combs is. And if there's this sort of very high-profile criminal trial happening in May or sometime in 2025, and the perception is that the family doesn't take this seriously, they're partying, they're drinking, it really plays into some of the allegations that this was just a party lifestyle, and these individuals thought that they were above the law. Now, again, I'm not saying that jurors don't follow the instructions in the law, and they're really supposed to decide the case solely based on the facts and evidence in the case. But we've seen it time and time again. It could be Johnny Depp, it could be Michael Jackson. Whenever you have someone who's high profile, and the narrative, the public perception, the PR really machine goes in one way, it can really help shape the opinions in the courtroom as well.
So we've talked about these sexual assault allegations that are against both Justin and Christian, but there's another incident that's pointed out in Lil Rod's civil suit, and this is in regards to Justin. I just want to touch on this one quick, that apparently there was a shooting at one of Diddy's recording studios years ago, and that Justin and Diddy apparently covered this up. Somebody was obviously shot and injured in this incident. There were reports on it, but not in relation to either of those two. Is this something that the feds would pursue? I mean, I know that the main part of the case is these sexual assault allegations, but could they head down that road toward attempted murder with a gunshot wound?
Potentially, and I've gotten this question a lot with respect to obviously the killing of Tupac, both in 1996 and the attempted murder in 1994. And a lot of people, I'm sure, watching believe that Combs, had something to do with that. I think it's challenging because then you start going in a very different direction, a rabbit hole.
Killing secret, the smoking gun that seals Diddy's personal loss, is that Sean Combs himself was named as a defendant, accused of aiding and abetting the alleged assault. Aiding and abetting, let that sink in. The father, the patriarch, the man who constantly preached about family and love, is accused in a legal document of not merely tolerating, but actively facilitating an environment, a high-seas freak-off environment, where his own son allegedly committed a heinous act. This is the moment the puffy persona dies a permanent, agonizing death. Diddy's breakdown isn't just about losing his freedom. It's about the alleged truth that he allowed his own son to be initiated into a world of darkness, that the secrets they shared were not lessons on how to run a label, but lessons on how to allegedly exploit and abuse. For Diddy, who valued image above all else, the revelation that his son is a direct participant in the alleged criminal toxicity is the ultimate humiliation. His downfall is no longer a solo act. His son's name,
Mr. Jones, to lie to the police by telling them that G was shot standing outside the studio by a drive-by assailant. So that specific allegation involves Diddy's son Justin, but another allegation and entirely separate civil lawsuit involves his other son Christian, or King Combs. Grace Omar K alleges that Christian Combs sexually assaulted her on a yacht in December 2022, and she says it was facilitated by Diddy. Diddy had rented the yacht around Christmas time, and Omar K says it was a revolving door of high-profile celebrities and sex workers who were often passed out on the ship's deck. The lawsuit says there were liquor bottles all over, and it was difficult to distinguish which ones were laced with drugs. Omar K alleges that on December 28, 2022, while working as a yacht deckhand, she was sexually assaulted by a heavily intoxicated Christian Combs, who physically assaulted her and allegedly forced her to perform oral sex on him. Since these suits were filed, both Justin and Christian Combs were seen in federal court at their father's appearance just last week. But could they too face charges? Here's where we bring in former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. So, talking about P. Diddy, I know we're talking about the crazy amount of allegations against him that are pretty shocking just unto themselves. But then there's also two of his children whose names have come up a bit throughout some of these civil lawsuits. We've seen headlines, both Justin and Christian Combs. Just to start right off the bat, what are you thinking about that, the inclusion of both of Diddy's sons and the accusations against those two?
I think that if we're talking about additional charges and additional defendants, those are probably two of the more likely. And Christian, of course, was the subject of a civil lawsuit where there was a sexual assault allegation naming him directly. So I think if we're going to cast a bit of a wider net, people are talking about family members, other celebrities, maybe some employees like Christina Forum, but I think the most likely would be those two sons.
Why do you think it's the most likely about those two? Just because of the recordings, the allegations against him? What are you thinking?
I think so. I think obviously they're just civil allegations, and those cases are going to be put on hold while the criminal case plays out. But, there is some smoke there. And obviously, there's a presumption of innocence and there's a lower standard in a civil case. But you have someone who's been named directly as someone who participated in a sexual assault, and everything else has been rumors and speculation. But here you at least have one verified complaint.
And you know what's interesting about this situation? It's the sexual assault civil allegation filed by Grace Omar K. This is against Christian Combs, as you're referring to it. And Diddy is a co-defendant in this case because she says he facilitated it. It was on a yacht that Diddy had rented. But it was Christian, the one who allegedly sexually assaulted her. I mean, so how does all of that relate? The fact that we have Diddy, who's also part of this, but it's mostly on Christian in this instance?
Yeah, in this particular instance, like you said, it did take place on a yacht. She was someone who was working at the time, and Little Rod was there apparently, and obviously he's a plaintiff in a civil lawsuit himself. But whenever you are a plaintiff in a civil case, you obviously want to go after someone with the ability to pay. That's what we call a deep pocket. So even though Diddy might not have personally participated in this alleged incident, you really want to wrap him in as a co-defendant, because obviously his ability to pay any judgment is going to be very different than Christian or Justin or any.
Name is now stained with the same tar. The empire has fallen, and it took the prince down with it. The psychological toll this must take on Diddy, a man obsessed with his own mythology, is immense. He spent decades making sure that every picture, every headline, every public move was intentional, projecting an image of unassailable black excellence. Now, his son's face is plastered across screens next to headlines detailing sexual assault allegations and facilitating freak-offs. King Combs' misguided attempt to defend his father with a diss track only made matters infinitely worse. The track, a desperate attempt at swagger, only served to highlight the family's shocking denial and arrogance in the face of federal charges and multiple civil lawsuits. It was a spectacular, self-inflicted wound that Diddy, the image architect, was powerless to prevent. The allegations against King Combs now include multiple civil lawsuits. The accusations are severe: sexual assault, facilitating what were called Wild King Nights, and being part of the alleged machinery of the elder Combs empire. The secret is that the bad boy image wasn't just marketing, it was, allegedly, An instruction manual for a horrifying, generational cycle of alleged abuse. For Diddy, who built his entire career on the mantra of love and family values, the revelation that his own son is entangled in a web of similar, disturbing allegations is the ultimate loss of self. His breakdown isn't visible tears, it's the total, irreversible public condemnation that he failed as a father, that the toxicity of his alleged life devoured his own family. When a man's biggest secret is the dark reflection in his own son, the defeat is absolute. Diddy is exposed as the alleged head of a criminal enterprise, but he is now also exposed as the architect of his own son's potential downfall. The shocking twist is that the dynasty ended not by outside forces, but by the corruption at its very core, a corruption that Diddy himself allegedly nurtured. The price of Diddy's secrets is now being paid not just by him, but by the very heir he groomed. That is the devastating final chapter that has caused the mogul to completely lose all remaining semblance of control. The secrets are out, the shame is shared, and the Combs family legacy is completely, and forever, tainted.